Hello and welcome again to another exciting edition of the Pittsburgh Steelers show on the SteelPerch.com podcast. This is a very special kind of a show because this is the start of our 13th annual PreDraft Extravaganza here at Steeler Fury. And tonight we are going to have a discussion about the Steelers offseason and have a special guest to talk about some fallers and risers and where quarterbacks are going to go. And how many of them are going to go before pick 24. And then during the course of the week, we're going to release more episodes, including an episode talking about the Steelers' needs in detail and who might fit those things with Jeremy Coleman. Then we're going to have the great young Nick Faribault talking offensive line with me for an hour about the whole offensive line class and potential fits. And then, as a special bonus, Bill Carroll of the Consensus Draft Services is going to talk with me about small schoolers and my B2B directional state team for 2021 of small schoolers and underrated players. And then we're going to have the pièce de résistance, a full Steelers War Room mock draft, all 7 rounds of picks for the Steelers. We will bandy around picks for each prospects for each pick. Then we'll select one as a team, and we'll see if we can do better than what the Steelers will do in the actual draft in a couple of weeks. I am your host, Bradshaw DeBen, also known as Wil Masisak. You might know me as Accidental Zen on Twitter. And I have with me for the 14th season of Steeler Fury and Pittsburgh Steeler podcast, the longest-running Steelers podcast in the world. I have with me 2 of the greatest cohorts that money can't buy, with me from somewhere in the greater Pittsburgh area, suburban zone 22 of that area. His name is SteelPerch. He's with us. How are you, sir?
I am technologically enabled tonight. 2 laptops, a cell phone, and an iPad. So,
wow.
If I need any information, I've got it.
See, you're like who was that GM that had the big screen, the big flat screen up above his desk, and then he had all the monitors and everything. And then they cut to like Bill Belichick, and he had the like 3x5 cards in a like a little container. And that, my friends, is our other co-host. He is somewhere in the South. He's actually recovering from 5 surgeries that he had done all at one time. He is the king of the Joel Bucksbaum 3x5 cards that Bill Belichick is so fond of. I wouldn't be surprised if he'd actually spent time doing 3x5 cards with Bill Belichick one day long ago. His name is Dom. It goes by FC. He is with us. How are you, sir?
I am day-to-day.
It is a day-to-day league, and it's a day-to-day show, kids. So anyway, a lot of podcast and Steeler and draft stuff going on this week that we're putting out there in the universe. So hope you guys appreciate it. And I really appreciate you guys being with me to talk about draft and do the Steelers mock war room later, because it's kind of like my favorite part of the entire year. I don't know, really looking forward to it. So let's start by talking about the Steelers offseason. Since the last time we spoke, which was sort of the, post-mortem on the Steelers season, since then a lot of stuff has happened. Some players have left. Some players have been added. Some players left and then came back. Ben redid his deal. I'm going to start with you, FC. What was your take on the Steelers offseason to this point? What do you feel like, what stuck with you? What seems important?
As of right now, they have to add a pass rusher. They need to add a left tackle. The future of Nelson and Villanueva seems to be up in the air a little bit. The local media seems to believe maybe one or both could be back still. That would change the offseason and draft needs quite a bit. But as we said earlier, you and I speaking on Twitter, incredibly, the Steelers really have 2 outside linebackers on their roster right now, and that's, Highsmith and Watt. They added Cassius Marsh back, but I wasn't overly impressed with
got nice
his performance last season. Yeah. And left tackle is a huge glaring hole. I mean, glaring could get. Also center. So, but the Steelers, considering what they had to do, where they were financially, they were as plain vanilla as I expect them to be, with the contracts they have coming due next year for young base star talented players with TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick do. And we do have a ton of cap room. But I'd say the Steelers offseason was pretty much what I expected, which was calm. If I had to use a word, calm would be the word I use. And that's sometimes for the best.
Yeah, that's a good word. Methodical, I think. And it's like if you're not used to it,
Sure.
you expect them, to do a bunch of, crazy juggling and stuff. That's just not really their way. Perch, the one thing that Dom didn't get into was Ben Roethlisberger redoing his contract, which basically, it's either a deal that's like the last year of his contract, like he's going to be gone next year, or it's a deal where they were like, we don't have any money to pay you this year, and you said you'd play for nothing, so we're going to do that. And if you happen to play lights out and you look like the old Ben, then you're going to get paid next year. What did you make of that deal, and what do you see as being the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, that contract does void at the end of the year, so it is essentially a one-year deal. And, for the Steelers, they can, it's very advantageous to them where they can watch Ben play and see how he plays and see how he looks. And I still think that there's a possibility that Ben comes back significantly better next year than he was last year, for the simple fact that, he sat out a whole year, didn't have a training camp or a real preseason or anything like that, was gun shy because he hadn't really thrown a ball or taken a hit and had to just go straight into regular season football. And then the team kind of, with all the changes to the schedule and is amped up as they were early in the year, and they had a pretty difficult training camp where it sounded like they were doing a lot more hitting, and they hit the wall late in the year and everybody's just kind of writing them off. I think that, he can come back and look like he did 2 or 3 years ago before the surgery, and then that's going to give the Steelers a difficult decision at the end of the year. What if Ben plays well and is healthy and wants to continue his career? That's going to be the tough one. If he goes out and is mediocre or whatever, or he gets injured again, or, he just decides that's it, then that's easy. You give him his last go-around, you give him the farewell tour, and then you do whatever you can to move up in the draft for the next quarterback next year. So, that's the Steelers in a good situation there. Like I said, the only thing that can be really sticky is if Ben does play lights out and wants to come back, and maybe they don't want him. That can be a problem.
Yeah, well, and it's it's sort of dependent upon so many other things. It's like if they still have no running game because they couldn't figure out a way to fix the offensive line with all the issues that they had. It seems like it doesn't matter how Ben might feel, it's going to be hard for him to play at a really high level, even with good receivers, because there's only so much you can do, especially when he doesn't have the mobility that he once did. I guess I would say.
Well, to that point, real quick, is the Steelers almost never go into a draft with a glaring hole where they absolutely have nobody on the roster. They'll pick up a middle of the road, free agent or whatever, just to patch it so they can say, hey, if we strike out at this position in the draft, we're still going to be okay. I don't feel that they have an NFL caliber running back or center on the roster right now.
Yep.
And they've got a whole bunch of other needs. So they're kind of boxed in, and you saw the stories that came out this week where the Steelers are committed to drafting a high caliber running back in the first 2 rounds, and there's only 3 or 4 in the whole draft. So, then that kind of hamstrings them. Well, then you've got to get a tackle, you've got to get a center, you've got to get defensive help, corners and linebackers, and they've really burned through a lot of the talent on the roster.
I mean, FC, to that point, is it the Steelers have drafted? Is it 4 or 3 or 4? I've lost track. I think it's 4 now, mid-round running backs the last 5 years.
Right.
And the thing is, people point at that and they're like, well, this is what happens if you try to, wait and get a running back later or whatever. But at every one of those picks, there were running backs available that ended up being a lot more successful than the guys that they picked. To me, the problem might be that they just don't pick very well. So the solution is pick better, not draft in the first round. I mean, do you feel like if they have to draft round 1 or 2 on a running back in order to get a good guy because they don't draft it well? Like, what a horrible admission.
I agree. I think there's one super elite back in this draft, and then there's one good back, and then there's guys that have potential. So, I mean, the 4 or 5 guys, are you going to hamstring yourself to the point where you have to take Najee Harris? I don't necessarily. I've seen Travis Etienne play a ton of football, seen a ton of Clemson games, and I don't think he's a first-round talent, and I'm not sure if he's a second-round talent.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, I don't value running back. Never have, never will. I believe you fix the offensive line, you can fix the running game.
Yeah, I mean,
but I do completely agree with Perch, where if Anthony McFarland doesn't have a ton that he hasn't showed you, we know what Jalen Samuels is. Connor's off the roster. It is what it is. So sooner or later you're going to have to address that position early or through free agency, or you're going to have to find a back in the 4th or 5th round, which they haven't been able to do. And your point of draft better, do better scouting, that's actually the answer.
Yeah. Well, and my point, Perch, would be, the only glimmer of hope that first of all, I would say they need to bring in multiple guys. It's not like they're going to just draft a guy, even in the 1st or 2nd round, and that fixes their running back room, because they need more guys and more competition. And there's a lot of guys on the street. There are undrafted free agent types from last year that didn't even get into camps because of the whole COVID thing. So there's an extra amount of guys on the street right now at running back that could probably help this team. But Perch, the one glimmer of hope I do have with at least the 2 running backs they have on their roster, Anthony McFarland and even Jalen Samuels, is that the guy who helped them have enough success to get drafted is now taking over the offense. Do you think there's any hope that Matt Canada can find the Jalen Samuels magic or the Anthony McFarland highlights that we saw from them in college under his offense?
There's no there. I think that's the problem. and you keep disrespecting Benny Snell and Kalen Bailedge, the 2 least explosive running backs in the entire NFL. You got 3 guys on the roster, those 2 and Samuels. There's just no explosion. There's nothing there. McFarland's got at least some juice to him, but he's small, and it's just, honestly, if I was starting from scratch, I wouldn't want any of those 4, even in a specialized role on my roster. I don't think Benny Snell's that great of a power back. Bailedge I don't think he's any better. I don't think he's even as good. And you know how I feel about Jalen Samuels. I don't think he has anything to offer as far as the running back position. McFarland, we just didn't see enough from, but they need a couple. What if you draft some guy in the 1st round and he gets hurt week 7?
Yep.
Or Benny Snell football again. It happens. You almost need to go one early and one late and have them both hit.
Yeah, and I do think running back is a position where there will be guys undrafted at the end of the draft who can come in and be a solid number 2 or 3 for your team. I don't think that's that hard to find. There are guys like that every year. They may not last long. They may not have a 10-year career in the NFL, but for 2 or 3 years, they can really help you. I think about a guy like Isaac Redman. That Isaac Redman would be the best back on the Steelers roster right now, would he not? I'm asking to no one, but so FC, the thing is, if they don't, they have these, they're kind of showing their hand to us, as they always do, whether we want to believe it or not, that what they really don't have on their roster, as you said, is a center. They really don't have a running back, and they have 0 depth at edge. They have only 2 guys at a position where they always play at least 3, and they prefer to play 4. So that feels
Joe
like
Haig. What you guys are forgetting about the Joe Haig signing.
Oh, Joe Haig.
Yeah. We don't have a left tackle.
Yeah. So, yeah, and they have a left tackle that they believe in, and maybe they think Chooks could even play there in a pinch. So, from their standpoint, I don't think they're showing us that they desperately feel like they need a left tackle. But from our standpoint, we're like, please, it's a draft that has left tackles for days. Grab one.
It does.
So anyway, I guess what I was going to ask was, do you think drafting, and obviously this is sort of a more philosophical question, this may be be the last one to ask in this segment, but do you think just because you have your biggest needs, you need those 3 guys, right? Center, an edge rusher somewhere, and or back, at least depth at edge rusher and running back. Do you feel like they have to be the first 3 picks or the 3 of the first 4 in order to be sure that you're getting the guys that you need?
I think that you have to prioritize those positions to where they are going to be the guys you need. So, yes, to answer your question. Do I think that you reach for a particular, let's say that Creed Humphrey goes off the board at 22. Do you all of a sudden go to your list and say, we have to take the second center at 24, even though we have him ranked as the 58th best prospect? No. Yeah, I think you move on to your list. If I actually don't want to draft Creed Humphrey. I pray they don't. I'll just put that out there. I have many problems with him. But if, let's say, a player, Creed Humphrey goes and Jalen Phillips is there at 24 for Miami, and let's say you have Jalen Phillips as the 18th guy, draft prospect, fills that pass rusher need that you have, regardless. Even T.J. Watt and and Highsmith can't play every down, so you're going to have at least three. So you may not be drafting a non-starter, but it's going to be a guy that's going to see significant snaps. I think that you have to go that way. I don't think that you can pigeonhole yourself, but I think that you do have to address and prioritize. I think that left tackle was also in that priority of those four positions. So, yeah, I would say that you do have to pigeonhole yourself to an extent, but not to a particular position, but to those group of positions.
I mean, just very quick. I just feel like, last year's a perfect example. They need to have a draft again like last year because, like your Kevin Dotson and Alex Highsmith in the part of the draft where they were selected. That's exactly what they need. They need to be able to hit on some guys, on that, especially in this draft where the depth of the talent from. This is the question I was going to ask you. I guess I'll go to that. How many guys you think are really like elite first round talents, and then how deep is the piece from where that ends to where they really start dropping off? Because this is the way you always look at it. I know you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if you look at it, there's a dozen or so elite, can't miss, got to draft them if they're first round talents, and then there's like 50 guys that can go between 15 and really they're going to go into the third round that are pretty similarly graded. It's going to come down to what the teams are looking for and what a position gets run on. Like the offensive tackles in this class are deep. So I think if Kevin Colbert's sitting there and he's scouting some of the smaller school guys, they're going to get pushed down to that third. Remember, they've got 2 picks in the fourth round too, and they've got that third rounder, and we've got 5 in the top 150. So, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly how I was thinking about it too. Is it's got to be a draft like last year. You've got to hit the first 4 or first 5 picks, and they've got to be able to not just become good players, but contribute right away. Because looking at the roster, there's 2 positions right now that I would absolutely say they don't have an NFL caliber player on the roster, running back and center. I just don't believe in any of the players they have there. And tackle's very thin. And outside linebackers very thin, and cornerback, based on what you think of some of the guys who are in the pipeline, that might be pretty thin too. So
slot corner, slot corner is definitely thin. They have a lot of outside guys.
Well, that's the thing. If you have a lot of outside guys, you could push push one of them over to into the slot, and I think the signing that they did have, keeping Cam Sutton there, I mean, he's flexible enough where he could play either. So if you look at it, if you get Hayden, and if James Pierre really steps up, if they really do like him as much as they say, and they think that the guy can play, that could be your outside guys and Cam Sutton. And who knows, maybe the light comes on for Justin Lane finally. I think he's a waste of a roster spot unless he proves me wrong, but that's possible too. Or maybe they pick somebody up in free agent, and there's still some pretty good corners floating around out there. Maybe they'll add one and erase a need.
So FC, I'm going to give you 3 choices. Which is the most likely thing to happen? Ready? 1 is the Steelers draft a quarterback at 24. Number 2 is they trade down from 24, take advantage of this deep talent pool. And 3, Steven Nelson re-signs with the Steelers.
Steven Nelson resigns with the
Steelers. Now, considering the bridges that he burned on the way out of town, it would be amazing.
How bad did he burn bridges on the way out of town? What he did is he exposed 2 horrible sports reporters that didn't have the facts. He never attacked the Steelers that I could really see directly. If you went to his Twitter, which he's very good on, if you go to his social media, which he's very active on, I don't remember seeing too much of him attacking the Steelers. Now, there's reports and there's quotes that Steven Nelson completely denies ever saying, and what that looks more like to me is modern-day journalism instead of the journalism that we grew up with in Pittsburgh. You know, we remember the days where we made fun of Jerry Dulac and Ed Bouchette and Prosciutto. Those guys, you know what? At least they were honest, reliable, and they gave you the story. They didn't have to rush to be first and be wrong. And then, because if he does return to Pittsburgh, there's going to be the Yinzers that are going to believe, oh, he hated Pittsburgh. He said all those nasty things, which he didn't say.
Boy, what an amazing moment you putting on the full Yinzer, man. That's unexpected and really, really well done, I might add. Wow. Perch, I'll give you the last word on the segment. Steelers going to draft Kyle Trask or Kellen Mond and sneak him into the first round?
100% no quarterback at all. They've got 4 on the roster. Okay, that tells you everything you need to know. 4 on the roster right now. That position's full. It's off the table.
Yeah, well, next year's a good quarterback year, I think. It's like maybe like FC referred to this draft year. You know, he said there's not a lot of quality, but the quantity is good. That's the way I feel about next year's quarterback class.
High quality.
Yeah,
high quality. There's quality. What I'm saying is like future Hall of Famer players, where you say you look at a guy like you looked at certain players coming out of college, and you're like, yeah, he's going to be a stud, no doubt about it, stud. Right. And I never felt that way about Jamarcus Russell. I won't lie and say I did feel that way about Ryan Leaf, and well, things didn't go well for him. But there's, there's guys that you just look at, like example, Charles Woodson coming out of Michigan. You knew he was going to be a star in the NFL.
Yeah.
Megatron.
I hear you. Well, all right, gents, we're about to find out. We're going to pick some future stars in our Steelers 7-round mock war room, where we're going to pick all the Steelers picks. That is coming up later in the week. And right now we're going to go to a special guest and talk about a little bit about the first round of the NFL draft and try to get a handle on how many quarterbacks we think are going to go before the Steelers pick at 24. And here's a clue. The more quarterbacks that get picked, the better for the Steelers at this point. Hey, and we have a very special guest here on the Steeler Fury podcast, PreDraft Extravaganza. He is the co-host of a very exciting new NFL podcast, if I must say so myself, called OldSchool NewSchool NFL Football. His name is Jude Allume. How are you, Jude?
Good. How are you, Will?
Yeah, you are the second best looking co-host of your podcast. Actually, I am the other. I'm the second half. I'm the old school part. In case you were wondering,
no bias
at all. No, you're a beautiful man, Jude. What can I say? But
jeez.
For those of you who are fans of the Steeler Fury podcast, you got to come over and give us a shot. We talk football. We did a draft breakdown of all the different position groups. We talked about free agency, and we talked about the draft. We did a first round mock draft to a marathon experience where we traded draft picks and all that kind of stuff. So, Jude, I know you're into the draft, and your first time as a guest here on the Steeler Fury show. Even though it's a Pittsburgh Steelers show, I wanted to talk for just a second about the draft at large, because sometimes, it's good to know the context of what's going on, especially the first round picks that are going to happen before the Steelers come on the clock at 24. So my first question for you is, what do you feel will be the general tone? Are we going to get all these quarterbacks selected before the Steelers pick?
Absolutely. You're going to get a ton of quarterbacks selected before the Steelers pick, but that's not necessarily a story. That's not necessarily the story of who the best players are in the draft. Is just, unfortunately, the nature of the game. We need a quarterback. And sometimes, even though the quarterbacks may not be the best players available, we're going to take them with the best picks we have, because, if you're waiting until those 20-something picks, those QBs aren't going to be there. So you got to make the moves to trade up and get them. Otherwise, the teams that are there will go ahead and take them as well.
So how many quarterbacks you figure are selected before pick 24? Are we going to get
before pick 24?
At
least
five?
At least 5. Wow. Absolutely 5. You're going to see Mac Jones fly off the board. You're going to see Justin Fields fly off the board. You already know the other guys are going to be going. Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, brain fart moment there. But those guys are absolutely coming out. If those 3 guys aren't out in the first 5 picks, I'd be very shocked. I'm seeing a lot of mocks. I'm seeing a lot of people, reputable people, say the first 5 picks could very well just be all quarterbacks. To get to pick 20-some and those 5 guys, any one of them to still be there, I'd be incredibly shocked.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, it's like, yeah, you can see it. If you need a quarterback, it's you need to use the picks. Although it just feels like at some point, the value, the other teams don't need a quarterback that bad, So it's like, if you know that not the whole league needs a quarterback, I can't believe you wouldn't be tempted to wait till your second round pick or to trade down a little if somebody wants to move up for a pass rusher or something.
And see, that's where the problem lies, because there are so many teams that do want a quarterback. Those top 3 teams right there. San Francisco had Jimmy G, but there's no way that you make a trade like that and you don't take a quarterback. Of course, the Jets and Jaguars, that's just quarterback purgatory, and they need some sort of energy just boosted into their programs. So they're definitely going to go quarterback. Falcons can take a quarterback. Panthers, I still feel like they're not sitting there happy and ready to go with Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Darnold. So I feel like those guys will definitely take a quarterback. New England, they only gave Cam Newton a 1-year contract. Do you think that's saying, yeah, this is our quarterback of the future? That's our, let's see how it works. But if a Mac Jones falls to us, if a Trey Lance falls to us, we're absolutely going to take him. The Broncos, still up there, very vocal that they're not completely sold on Drew Lock. Another team, right? That's 3 teams minimum, and I'm sure I can keep going on and add more to that list. But that right there is 6 teams that in the first 10 to 15 picks who are going to be looking at quarterback, and very well maybe. So to get to the 15th pick and beyond and think that, one of the best quarterbacks are going to be there still, you're dreaming.
Well, let me ask you this. We go the other direction. Who's the 6th quarterback taken, and when is the 6th quarterback going to get taken?
See, that's the other thing, too. I was saying it before. The best players aren't going to get taken with the best picks. So we could possibly see someone reach up and grab a quarterback way before anybody else was thinking it. I think the next best in that next group of quarterbacks is going to be Kellymann out of Texas A&M. So here's a guy who went to the Senior Bowl and pressed some, ends up winning the Senior Bowl most valuable player. You look at his career at Texas A&M, he set a lot of numbers in a short span of time, did some great things there, showed that he can be the guy for that program. And you know what? A lot of people do tend to give that SEC, sway, where it's like you're playing in the best conference in all of college football and you're still able to produce at a high level. So it kind of gets you pushed to a higher draft pedigree than you otherwise would have. Yeah. As far as first round, I think he's in that tier where it's more likely you'll see guys say, you know what? This defensive guy is better. This receiver is better. Sure. I'm going to wait and hope that he's there in that second half, in that second round, that third round, right. So that way I don't have to take him in the first. But absolutely, I think he's the next best quarterback aside from the 5 that everyone's speaking about.
It just feels like you might find somebody who wants to bump up to get that 5-year contract with a guy like that. Mm-hmm. The only reason I could see him maybe, it just wouldn't surprise me if a Kyle Trask or Kellymann got picked late in the first round by somebody moving up that didn't get their quarterback the first time around, like Chicago, So I just thought, but when you're a team that's, it's like the Steelers don't really have a shot of getting a quarterback. They're not moving up to the top 4 or 5 picks. So since you're not going to get a great quarterback, man, what a great position to be in to just have the whole draft fall to you. But you're going to have some team is going to pick in the top 5 a quarterback, and they're going to regret not picking Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase, like for the rest of those guys' careers. Like we could have picked that guy.
I mean, you have to go with what you need, and unfortunately, quarterback is always going to be a bigger need than any position on the field. I can't imagine any situation in which there's a quarterback that you believe in and you trust will help you win games, and you say, you know what, this receiver I just feel like is way better. I'm going to go with the receiver instead. You know,
quarterback has the guy.
Man.
Yeah, no, if you don't have the guy to get it to those receivers, it doesn't matter. And you know, if you pick the wrong quarterback early, you'll be right back picking it early again. So
within the next couple of years,
you have plenty of chances to get by. Just one other subject. Let's talk a little bit about fallers and risers. And it could be that they're overrated or underrated, or it could just be a guy who is maybe a more specific taste or fit that may not fit on every team. Who do you think is
quarterback of this
going to drop a little bit farther than we thought they were going to get selected?
Who's going to drop a little farther? You know what? I feel like, unfortunately, Jalen Waddle might fall a little bit. I'll say his name because, obviously, that's a huge name, right? And then he has a couple things working against him, just that he's got all these quarterback-needy teams, you know, that are probably going to pick. And then he's coming off that ankle injury that kept him out for most of last season. So I don't think don't get me wrong, he's not going to last probably past 15, but I feel like, judging from what he did in 2019 and beyond, he had legit top 5, top 10 potential. I feel like maybe he falls out of that top 10 because a team might say, you know what, we want Devonta Smith as opposed to Waddle, and then for sure somebody's going to say we're going to take Chase instead. Yeah. And then the other thing is just that the way the draft order is set up, all these teams except for maybe like Miami, but I feel like if Miami's going to go receiver, they're going to go with Chase. Yeah. But these teams, none of them are like, we really need a wide receiver right now. A lot of them is quarterback, defensive assistants, and, you know, it would be nice to have a Waddle on your team, but you can't say, you know what, I already have great players at this position. Let's add them on top. It's just the way it's set up this year. This is a guy I feel like could, you know, last outside of that top 15. I wouldn't say top 20. I feel like definitely they're
eventually,
right there, 15 to 20, because then you get to the point where it's like, hey, this is a top 10 talent. Like, I don't care. We need to take him.
Yeah, it's like, it's just a lot of wide receivers in this draft. And so I'm sure the temptation will be, it's like, if you don't absolutely think this guy is perfect and so much better than the next tier of guys like Rashad Bateman or Kadarius Toney or whatever, then it's like, you know, there's some got to be tempting to move, you know, to wait till later to get that guy and pick something else you can't get later. So that number of wide receivers coming in this year and next year, man, it just feels like there's no pressure to take a wide receiver early for a lot of these teams. What about a name that we talked about a little bit when we did our first round draft, who fell in our draft, Azeez Ojulari? It just feels like he isn't he isn't like he's not going to be like a 4-3 defensive end. You know, that Jalen
Miami guy. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. What is his name?
Jalen Phillips. Phillips.
He's not the, you know, the 4-3 defensive end that Jalen Phillips is going to be. He's not even like a Kwity Paye kind of vibe. He's not that workout wonder that Jason Owa is. It just makes me feel like he just was just more of a specific fit. I could see him falling maybe into the 20s, where out a month ago, people were talking about him being the best pass rusher in the draft. What's your take on that?
I mean, you know, it's one of those things where in this current climate that we're in, where it's like, you know, game tape is going to do so much for you, but so many teams are putting, you know, all this extra emphasis on these game tapes, but also on your pro days and things like that. And you just have guys who have game tapes that were just as good as Ojulari's, and then they had some great pro days. So now it's like, you know what? I feel like just human nature, it's all about what have you done for me recently. And Ojulari didn't have a bad pro day, but some of these guys just had way better pro days. And every NFL guy is just going to see a prospect, a draft prospect, put up freakish numbers, and it's all of a sudden just like, oh man, I'd really like to see what he can do for my team. I wonder if this is going to translate onto the field. And you know what? It just happens where now you get bumped up because this guy runs a faster 40. This guy has a better three-cone drill. And it's unfortunate because Ojulari didn't necessarily do anything wrong, because, you know, he played as well as he possibly could, and he put together a great a great highlight tape for himself. But at the end of the day, the team that ends up picking him, they're going to feel great because you have a great player. He can certainly get to the quarterback. Sure. And you know what? You'll get him at a later time than he's supposed to go, and you're just going to be happy with it. He might not be happy about it because you're going to want that top 10 money, but hey, man, that's the NFL. It's just a matter of show it to us once you get here, and then you'll just get the payday on the second contract.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to have too much trouble getting paid. That would be my guess. One last question, since we're on the Steelers kind of topic. Do you think running back or running backs will go before the Steelers pick at 24? And if so, which running back do you feel like it'll be?
I don't see a lot of running backs going in this first round, and that's a great thing for the Steelers. The one thing I'll say though is that the Steelers might say we're not going to use our first round pick on our running back. A wise man once said, good teams don't use first-round picks on running backs. And just look at the nature of the NFL. It used to be a league in which that first pick overall very well could have been a running back.
That's right. Ricky Williams, they traded their whole draft for Ricky Williams.
One of the most idiotic trades I've ever seen in my entire life. But we're not going to get into that right now. In the last decade or so, how many running backs have been really taken with the top 10 pick? I'll say Saquon, Ezekiel, Leonard Fournette,
Cook, yeah,
Dalvin Cook, top 10.
I'm not sure. Close.
I don't know if Dalvin was top 10, but
top 15 maybe. Yeah,
I still don't think there's anybody else after that. Definitely not in the top 10. I don't see anyone taking a running back.
Talk about maybe Miami and their second pick.
With their second first round pick, I don't think so. I feel like Miami has more options that will better benefit their team than to go running back. Like, it would be nice for them to have one of these really good running backs in Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, but I feel like they like what they got last year from Gaskin. And of course, they've added some pieces in the offseason as well. So it's not a position of need at all. And me, of course, you know that I go needs-based drafting, and this is not a need. And if you really wanted to just to be flashy, there's several other guys that they can take to be flashy at receiver, at tight end, things of that nature. And I just, it could happen, but it's with so much other talent that can make a much bigger impact, immediate impact. Right. I don't see them doing it. Again, good news for the Steelers. Don't know if the Steelers will say, I'm going to take a running back. I would say in that second round is where you might see a little run on running backs. Primarily for me is either just Najee Harris or Travis Etienne. Those are the top two guys that are going to come off the board. If you see that run and one gets taken early second round, right, then it might be a little trouble for Pittsburgh because, I don't know, you're kind of biting your nails because at any moment that second guy can go. But there's some good guys still remaining over that you can take second or later that, it's not going to be a huge pain. Who's the guy out of Memphis? I really like him a lot.
Kenny Gainwell.
You can definitely target him in the second round.
And Trey Sermon or
Trey Sermon, I feel like you can wait a lot more.
That's what my point is, though. But that guy would, if you make the line right, any of those running backs, I think, could do something for you. They all have a little something different. Javonte Williams, we didn't mention, from North Carolina.
Javonte Williams, yeah.
But it's like you're preaching to the choir here. I feel like I'm never going to be impatient to reach for a running back early because there's just so many factors that tell you that it doesn't make your offense more likely to win if you have a top running back. It definitely helps. It's never bad to take a good player, but I'm not sure that it's the value that the Steelers need. They have so many holes right now.
Yeah.
Jude, Old School New School Football. If you look for it on YouTube or Facebook, I think that's Old School New School Football NFL. If you look at it on the Twitter or Instagram, it's OSNSFB. He's Jude Allume. I'm Wil Masisak. Yeah.
Instagram is actually Old School New School FB.
Oh, there you go. It's written out Old School New School FB. There you go. It's all. Just look for Old School New School Football NFL and Jude Allume. Thank you for being with us, man.
No problem. Thanks for
having me. I know
you're
rooting against the Steelers draft, but it's okay.
Maybe a little bit, but no.
I'll get you to have a vested interest before this is all said and done.
As long as Ben Roethlisberger is your quarterback, I don't think I really need to worry about the Steelers posing a threat.
Oh, wow. Okay. On that note, Jude,
Sorry.
thank you, sir. That'll do it for this episode of the Pittsburgh Steelers show on the SteelPerch.com podcast. I'm, as always, your host, Wil Masisak. This is the first episode of this week's entire week of episodes for the Steelers draft, the pre-draft extravaganza. So tune in tomorrow where we will talk Steelers needs with special guest Jerry Coleman, and also the Old School New School. We have a bunch of draft shows this week, including a first-round mock. You can tune into that show to find out who the Steelers picked at pick 24. Jude Allume, thanks for being with us, and thank you all for listening. Subscribe down below. See you tomorrow on another episode. I'm Wil Masisak saying, go get them, Steelers.
Not saying that.